Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now, here are your hosts, R. Blank and Stephanie Warner.
Dr. John Burd is a renowned scientist and the founder and former CEO of Dexcom, the leader in continuous glucose monitoring systems. His current research is focused on the toxic sugar coating that happens when excess glucose binds to and changes proteins in our bloodstream, a process called protein glycation. Dr. Burd is the founder of Lysulin and WonderSpray, and he is also a #1 best-selling author of The Natural Solution to the Diabetes Epidemic, The Discovery of Lysulin. Dr. Burd is an expert in his field who loves to share natural solutions to big healthcare problems, which we'll learn about more on today's show. Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, Dr. Burd.
Thank you so much for having me. I just love talking about these great products and helping people to better health. So I hope we reach some folks that we can help.
That would be great. Yeah. So, just as to get us started, those folks I think would like to learn more about your journey as in healthcare and as a medical innovator. Can you share some details about that?
Sure, I'll be happy to. I was born in Indiana, went to school at Purdue and then the University of Wisconsin. And I got my PhD in biochemistry at the University of Wisconsin. And I returned to the Ames division of Miles Laboratories, which is in Elkhart, Indiana. And the Ames division was the first company that developed products for people with diabetes. They first developed a urine dipstick product, and then they developed the first home finger stick blood test with a little meter. And as the first in the field, they were the leader for a couple of years, but then they were overwhelmed by better products and better marketing, especially from LifeScan, who became the world leader in continuous glucose monitoring. And then that was a huge market for a while, but then the bottom fell out when Medicare finally realized that they were paying too much for glucose test strips. And now the new focus is on continuous glucose monitoring, where I was fortunate enough to be involved with Dexcom as the founder and first CEO. And I've been developing medical products for almost 50 years now, and mostly for laboratory testing and some home testing products, but also now I'm involved in natural products for big healthcare problems like Lysulin and WonderSpray. So
Sweet.
That's kind of how I got here today.
Yeah. So you touched on a bunch of things I want to get into. But as a kind of a simple starting point, and I know this may sound like a really simple question, so I apologize in advance if it does. Because we've all heard of diabetes, but in basic terms, I'm not sure we all understand actually what it is. So in as simple and brief terms as possible, can you explain what diabetes actually is?
Yeah, I think I can. There's two major types. Type 1 diabetes is a juvenile onset, and that's what happens when it's an autoimmune disease where your body attacks your pancreas as an autoimmune disease. And when it does that, your pancreas no longer makes insulin. And insulin is needed to get glucose into your cells to produce energy. Type 2 diabetes is very different from type 1 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is a result of what's called insulin resistance. And as I said, you need insulin to get, it's like the key that fits in the lock on your cell on the insulin receptor. And when that key insulin goes into the lock, it opens the door and allows glucose into your cells. Well, when you get insulin resistance, my theory is that comes from what's called protein glycation, which you mentioned in your introduction. And that's because glucose we need for energy, but it's also toxic. It's a reactive chemical. It reacts with all the proteins in your eyes, in your nerve endings, and your kidneys, and your bloodstream, everywhere. And when glucose reacts with these proteins, they go on to produce what's called advanced glycation end products. And these are thought to be the cause of all the complications of diabetes. And Lysulin is the only product that targets the cause of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, not just the symptom of high blood sugar. And I'm not making this up. It's been proven in published clinical studies. That was a little long-winded, but I hope you see the difference.
That was great. I really appreciate that. So one reason why so many people know the term diabetes is because it is so prevalent today. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts or insight into why diabetes has become so prevalent in the population.
Yep, it's a lifestyle, what they call a lifestyle disease. It's because of our terrible diets. Basically, and in my book, I go through this. My book is like a conspirator book. It's like a conspiracy between the government, big pharma, the food industry, and the medical community to keep people on high carbohydrate diets. It's just ridiculous. Really, low carbohydrate diets are the best thing you can do. It's like food is the best medicine. And when you eat carbohydrates, they get into your bloodstream where they make glucose. And that's what causes the problem. Too much glucose causes glucose toxicity, and that leads to insulin resistance and diabetes.
Sorry to cut you. When you were giving the background on your personal journey, it seems like diabetes care, or at least diabetes diagnosis, has been part of your career for a very long time. I'm wondering if you have a personal connection to this disease.
Yeah, I was actually named after an uncle, Uncle John, who actually died of complications of diabetes a long, long time ago. And as I've gotten older, all of my relatives have also gotten older, and many of them have developed diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and I'm glad to say that Lysulin's helped most of them. Lysulin works for 70% of people who use it. So some people will, for whatever reason, not get the benefit. But if it does work, it works great, and it can see your A1C drop in just 1 month. So you'll know very quickly if it works or not. And we actually sell a home test, the A1C now self-check, so people can run an A1C at home. And it's an excellent companion product for Lysulin, because you can take a test before you start, and 1 month later test again, and you'll see if you're in that 70% that it works for.
So I definitely want to get back to the home testing, but let's jump into actually learning a bit more about Lysulin. So one thing I noticed about Lysulin is I saw in your mission statement, part of the first line is better health without prescription drugs. Now, I know this message appeals to many of my listeners. I'm wondering why avoiding prescription drugs is a priority for you, and I'm talking about your opinion, your personal approach to healthcare and medicine. Why is avoiding prescription drugs a priority for you, so much so that you made it the first sentence in your mission statement?
Yeah, and this is my opinion too, so don't get it confused with the Lysulin Incorporated. But as my personal opinion, I hate it when I hear that people with type 2 diabetes get put on insulin. That is a one-way street. And when you take insulin injections, not only do you have to take a shot once or twice or more a day, but you have to take more and more, and it works less and less because you have insulin resistance. And I think 70% of people with type 2 diabetes that are taking insulin might be able to get off of it if they use Lysulin. I mean, everybody with type 2 diabetes almost immediately gets put on a drug. Doctors love to prescribe drugs. Metformin is one of the most popular ones, and I have had a lot of folks use Lysulin, and they've been able to stop taking metformin.
And do they need to continue taking Lysulin? Does that have a finite treatment duration?
It's totally different than insulin. With insulin, you have to take more and more, and it works less and less. With Lysulin, you take 3 servings a day for most of the products. We also have a once-a-day powder that's just once a day. But with the 3 servings a day of Lysulin, if you achieve your A1C goal, so if you go from like an A1C of 8 or 9 down to 5.5, you can actually drop back to 2 servings a day. And if your A1C stays low, you can go back to 1 serving a day. And if your A1C still stays low, you can stop taking Lysulin and just monitor your A1C. And if it starts to go up again, start Lysulin again. So it's not a lifetime prescription. It's possible to use it until it gives you the benefit of improving your insulin resistance. And if you also simultaneously start a low-cal, low-carbohydrate diet, you may not have to take Lysulin. You just fix it with diet and a little bit of exercise.
So I know you mentioned, well, I mentioned it in the intro, and then you mentioned it also, this protein glycation. I'm wondering if, in, again, as simple terms as possible, because we're not all quite as educated as you, can you explain what that is? And again, as simply as possible, what Lysulin actually does to you and to your body?
Yep. When glucose reacts with your proteins all have what are called amino groups on them. Like hemoglobin has an amino group that gets glycated, and that turns it into hemoglobin A1C, as an example. And this is just a chemical reaction of, if this is a protein and this is glucose, and it reacts with the protein. And when you do that, it changes the structure of that protein and therefore the way it functions. So that's why those, like insulin and insulin receptor, both get glycated. So that key doesn't fit in the lock anymore. Now, when you take Lysulin, Lysulin has a high amount of the amino acid lysine in it. And we all have lysine in our blood, but our body can't make lysine. You have to get it from the food we eat. And processing of food can remove lysine so that the levels are very low. If glucose, for example, is 100 mg per deciliter, lysine is about 0.5 mg per deciliter. So it's really low. And when you take Lysulin, the lysine in Lysulin raises the blood level of lysine so that now the glucose has a choice. It can either react with your proteins or it can react with the lysine. And when it reacts with lysine, you form glycated lysine, and you just excrete that in your urine. So it's like a sponge. It soaks up excess glucose to prevent that reaction from happening. A little long-winded again, but I hope that's clear.
No, not long-winded at all. So again, I apologize if I sound ignorant by asking questions this obvious, but what makes this natural as opposed to a drug?
Well, drugs are artificial chemicals that react with your certain things in your body to produce an effect. Lysulin is just lysine, zinc, and vitamin C, all compounds that you have in your blood right now. The FDA doesn't like us saying natural, so we got to be careful. We also had an FDA warning letter in September where they said we were making drug claims. And our label on our product, here's the liquid, says it's nutritional support for people with diabetes and prediabetes. Well, we had to change that label to make the FDA happy. So now we just say nutritional support to help maintain healthy glucose, A1C, and insulin function. So fortunately, that's been resolved now. That FDA is kind of like a sword of Damocles if it's hanging over your head, but we're really happy to get that issue resolved with them.
Yeah, that's great. So I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of people in general definitely agree with reducing the use of prescription drugs. But do you think that means that natural remedies are always better?
No, not always. Like I say, Lysulin only works 70% of the time. It doesn't work for everyone. So those folks need to do something else. Again, food is the best medicine. That's been known forever, really. But nonetheless, our government and the food industry, that crazy pyramid that everybody knows about, the food pyramid that has high carbohydrate, low fat, that was basically made as a result of the farming lobby in Congress, because we had acres and acres of wheat and corn and rice and potatoes that needed to market. So the government recommended high carbohydrate diets. And high fructose corn syrup is the devil's work, really. The reason the food industry uses high fructose corn syrup is because it's cheaper than sugar. And fructose is not like glucose. It provides no energy. Fructose goes straight into your cells where it makes fat. So that's the problem.
And that reminds me. I guess this is a little off topic, but it reminds me of the saying. I don't know if you're aware of Michael Pollen, who wrote, among other things, in defense of food. And he said his advice boils down to eat food, mostly plants, and not too much. And that was his general eating advice for people.
Yeah, unfortunately, vegetarian diets also, if you just eat vegetables, they have a lot of carbohydrates in them too. So I'm a big fan of what are called ketogenic diets, which is you can eat all the meat and fish and shrimp that you want, but avoid carbohydrates. And you can Google glycemic index, and it shows you which foods have a high glycemic index, which is bad, and you want to get a low glycemic index diet.
So stepping back and actually, yeah, I was thinking about this when I was preparing for the show to talk about Dexcom, but I saw that you now also have a continuous glucose monitoring system that you're selling now. Could you hold that up again?
No, it's not a continuous glucose monitor. It's a A1C
okay.
self-test. So this is a blood test. So you prick your finger and put a little drop on a test strip, and it gives you your A1C, which is not glucose. That's your average blood sugar over the previous months.
I see. Gotcha. So I think that and your experience with Dexcom, I think make you suited to talk a bit about this, Bert, because these home tests, whether you're talking about continuous monitoring or on-demand tests, they seem to be an important, to me, as this is the Healthier Tech podcast, and we talk a lot about ways in which tech interacts with our health. They seem to open up a whole bunch of opportunities for people to figure out their personal path forward, because they'll have access to information that they just wouldn't have had, because otherwise you'd have to go make an appointment with the doctor, and then go to the appointment and then get the test done and then wait until the results are in. And then, a week later, if you wanted to see if anything was working, you'd have to go through all of that again. These home testing systems seem to really open up quite a bit of opportunity for people to improve their health. And I imagine you feel the same way.
Exactly. It's like with continuous glucose monitoring, you can see how the things you do affect your blood sugar levels. So if you've got a continuous glucose monitor and you eat a high protein meal, you'll see, oh, wow, my glucose level didn't go up very much after I ate that fish or steak or whatever. Whereas when you eat that chocolate chip cookie, you'll see, oh, look, my glucose level really went up. So yeah, continuous glucose monitoring is really fabulous. And it's hard to get that from the individual home glucose test strip, where when you test your glucose with a test strip, that tells you what your glucose is at that moment in time. And you don't know if it's going up or going down or staying the same. So yeah, I'm a big fan of continuous glucose monitoring. I'm also a big fan of what I call non-invasive glucose testing, which I guess there are 3 continuous glucose monitors on the market now. One is Dexcom, one's Medtronic, and one's Abbott. And they all involve using a little needle that you stick through your skin. It's painless, but it's still a needle. And I'm involved with another company in Florida that has a continuous non-invasive glucose test system that is just like a watch you wear. And that company's called ALERTGY, Alert G. And they've got a website that shows that product. And they're going into FDA trials now. And I think it'll be lower cost, last longer. And really, I love the continuous glucose monitoring systems, but they're pretty expensive. And Dexcom is the most expensive one. Abbott is the least expensive. But Dexcom is the world leader because it has alarms and it performs great. So
Yeah, I have a friend who has continuous glucose monitoring, and he basically has it's kind of on his side, or I think it's in his body, and then he can look at his phone and see what's what's going on with his levels. And what's happened is, not only does he have that visibility all the time, but he's also has been able to get more of a customized approach to his insulin. And what's happened is his AOC has gone way, way down. It's great. And I wonder, how would that and Lysulin work together? Do you see like vast improvement when you have the two things going on? Or, could you talk about that a little?
well, I do, but unfortunately the Dexcom management doesn't agree with me. Because basically Lysulin is the only product that improves your insulin resistance, which means if you use Lysulin, it works for you. Instead of taking 20 units a day, you may need to take only 10 units a day. And insulin's expensive, so that really helps. And we've got people that have Dexcom systems that use the product, and they've seen that. Many of them have seen that they've used less insulin, and their A1C's even further improved. Again, it doesn't work for everyone. And Lysulin we target it really for people with diabetes and pre-diabetes, because if you have type 1 and you're taking insulin shots, you got to be careful you don't get hypoglycemic. But with Dexcom, if you do, it gives you an alert. Hey, you're getting low, so eat a little bit of glucose. So, and that's the people that have used Lysulin with type 1 all have a continuous glucose monitor with an alarm. Well, it helps everybody. And even, we also have a new product for Lysulin, which is a shake, a meal replacement shake, and with Lysulin in it. So you get the promise of potentially getting weight loss and improved diabetes management.
So you bring bring a lot of expertise and experience with this topic. And so while we have the opportunity to ask you this, given your background, given your focus, for our listeners looking to improve their health and wellness, could you please provide one specific piece of advice that you would give as a professional to our listeners so that they could start working on?
Get off carbs.
Nice and short. I like that. That not even 4 words. No, that's
Finally,
nice and simple.
Answer.
Yeah.
all carbs, or are there specific carbs that you would say, definitely stay away from these? Because all carbs, it's pretty rough, but is there a hierarchy of good to bad when we're talking about carbs?
Well, it's hard for me to answer that question. I myself am like, it's like a religion for me. It's like all carbs are bad. Okay. But if you still want to eat some carbs, then go to Google and Google glycemic index for whatever carbohydrates you're interested in eating. There may be some that do have a very, a better glycemic index. But for me, since it's hard to decide which carbs are good and which carbs are bad, I'd say just avoid them all. You have to answer that question.
Right.
It's hard to do.
Yeah, it is for sure. And, I think about the people who don't eat meat at all. What would they then do?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's funny, there's vegans that eat eggs, for example, or fish. So
I don't think those are. I don't think those are vegans. I think there's certain vegetarians who make exceptions for those things. But yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, no. If you're if you don't eat meat, I assume Steph. I think you're right. It's pretty hard to follow even just a low carb diet, much less a no carb diet.
Actually, that's going to be a good thing to Google. It would be, if I'm a vegan, what foods can I eat with low carbohydrates?
Well, the key is the low carb or the low glycemic. So when
Yeah.
you add that into the mix, that takes away your rice, your potato, anything with starch, which is usually the staple of what, fills you up on those types of diets. So, if you're just eating carrots and greens, that's great, but it's really hard for that to be a sustaining thing to do.
Actually, that's why I like the shake. It takes the place of one meal a day. So you can go from a 1,000-calorie meal down to a 150-calorie meal that has fiber in it. So it should kind of fill you up and help you to lower your daily calories.
So, Dr. Burd, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot about. Diabetes is something I've heard about my whole life, but I never really dove into it, and I really appreciate how much I've learned from you in this conversation. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you, learn more about Lysulin, and connect with you?
The website is a good place to start, www.lysulin.com. And we also haven't talked about my other company and my other product, which is WonderSpray, which I got interested in because it's the ingredient in WonderSpray is FDA cleared for wound healing. And you may or may not know that people with diabetes have wounds that don't heal, and
Yes.
on their, especially on their legs and feet. And that can be a real problem, leading to, among other things, amputation. And the reason they don't heal is because you don't have good circulation, so your normal healing doesn't work. And you also get bugs growing in your germ bed. And the active ingredient in WonderSpray is called HOCl, hypochlorous. And that's what your white blood cells use to kill all germs, bacteria, virus, yeast, mold, and fungus. And when you spray that on your wound, it basically gets rid of that biofilm and kills all those bugs so your healing can take place. And it's also good for just a whole laundry list of other ailments, including any skin ailment like acne or rashes, eczema, eye issues. You can spray it right in your eyes, nose, and throat. It's totally safe and non-toxic. And it's a fabulous product, and getting the word out is really difficult. So to learn more about WonderSpray, the website, go to www.drburd, D-R-B-U-R-D, WonderSpray.com. If you go to WonderSpray.com, there's another product, unfortunately, on the market. It's a portable bidet.
Yeah.
And that's not
you guys should do a joint venture. Yeah. We'll make sure to include both of those URLs in the show notes. So once again, Dr. Burd, thank you so much for you generously offering your time and insight on the Healthier Tech podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been great having
you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I hope my responses weren't too long-winded, and I hope you and I can both help people to better health, because that's what I'm here for.
Excellent. Totally.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in the show. Please like and subscribe to the Healthier Tech podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Get your free quick start guide to building a healthier relationship with technology and our latest information at healthiertech.co.